All right, so we are recording, and welcome everyone to the Data Visualization Tools training on Google Data Studio. My name is Colleen Walters. I'm the Delaware River Basin Program Manager for River Network, and I'm joined by my colleague Adam Griggs, who's the Science Manager for River Network. Next slide, Adam. And so just as a reminder, this training is part of a series that we have been in collaboration with the Academy of Natural Sciences and Stroud Water Research Center. We've done a few webinars so far. Our most recent one was the Data Informed Storytelling with Resource Media back in September. And all of our webinars are on our River Network website, and I will pop that link into the chat in just a moment. But so if you've missed any of those webinars or you just want to go back and view them again, you can do so through the River Network website, and it also has a list of available data products and visualization tools that are available through all three of our organizations. So with that, I'm just going to hand it over to Adam to get started.
All right, thank you, Colleen. And thanks everyone for joining us. We've got a ton to try to get through today, and hopefully going to have about half of the time today to be an actual demo. And if you are interested in kind of following along with the demo today, there's going to be a data set at the end that I'm going to make available. And if you haven't used Google Data Studio, maybe as I'm going along, go ahead and Google it. There are some terms and conditions. You have to check the boxes, link it to your Google Drive, because it's going to be powered by Google Sheets. And that will just save us some time at the end as everyone tries to follow along with a little Delaware data set I put together from the water quality portal. So with that said, today's agenda, we're going to talk about what Data Studio is and how it can help you. How you get started, and then the three basic steps of creating a data source, building a report, and then publishing and sharing that report. And then we're going to jump right into a demo time, and then in the final Q&A, we're also going to be joined by the Musconetcong Watershed Association, who has received some training in this prior, and they've gone ahead and started building some dashboards to expose some of their data. And so appreciate them being able to join us today. So what is Google Data Studio? It's a data visualization tool, free for use, available through your browser. If you've seen Google Analytics for your website, it's basically the engine that they created for that, and then realized that they built something that could be useful for others. And so it's a free tool that they're continuing to develop and add new functionality to. And right now it's free for use. And it's all about building these live data dashboards and reports, and you can embed images and videos and URLs and really make anything you want. And then quite easily, this can be embedded directly in your web page or just shared via a link. So we'll take a quick look real quick at what some of these look like, just so you know where we're headed. This is a simple data dashboard that I built a couple weeks ago for the Purgatory watershed out in Colorado. And this is running off of data from the water quality portal as well. And this just gives you a sense of kind of the capabilities, but it gives you some information. On the left side here, you're seeing the number of stations and the record counts. In the middle here, we have some filter controls. So if we're interested in only seeing low-end dissolved oxygen values, we can drag this slider, and all the information in the tables and the scoreboards and the map is going to change depending upon what we select. We can select a date range. We can select what data provider we want to look at. And again, all the information changes live, and the map is live as well. You can zoom in and get more information from the data that's being shown there. And all of this is running off of one single data sheet that has been uploaded to Google Sheets. And so this is all pretty user-friendly. This whole thing took only about an hour or so to put together. In the basin, for a couple of folks that I showed this to before, this is from Bartram's Garden. Chloe Wing there just put together a simple viewer that allows her to see her E. coli data matched up against recent rainfall and some thresholds also, so that she knows when potentially their geomean might be violating recreational water standards. And then here's another example. This one is very station driven, showing information about the station. This is from the Musconetcong Watershed Association. Hopefully we'll be able to hear a little bit more about how they did this. And if you have any questions for Krista, we'll hopefully have some time for that at the end. So that's, just a real quick look at what's possible here with the Data Studio. Let's go ahead and talk about how does it work. So the 3 steps basically: create a data source, build a report, and then share it. And of these 3 steps, step 1, as Muskin and Kong could probably attest, is the most difficult. If your data is not ready necessarily and formatted without errors and omissions for analysis, that's probably where you're going to spend most of your time. So let's talk about that first step. Data Studio can connect to a variety of different data sources. We're going to talk about Google Sheets today because that is by far, I think, the most easiest and approachable place to be storing data to look at it with this tool. But if you do have your data in a SQL database or some other BigQuery is a Google online database or some other place that it's online, you can potentially build a connector and reach to it from there. So with that said, we're going to launch a quick poll and just get some information from you guys on how and where is your data currently stored. So we just have some sense of where you're starting from and where your data is located. And you'll see also some of the options here. If you currently participate in the DWRI and you submit data to the Academy, that data is already going to be properly formatted the way that you share it with them. So that's a great resource. And similarly, if you have data from loggers that's coming out of How's My Waterway, that data is also already formatted properly so we can use that data as it stands.
All right, and I'll just give it a few more seconds. We still have a few folks that are waiting to answer. We have some notes in the chat, Adam, about other sources or other places that they store the data.
Oh, great.
All right, let me end the poll and share the results.
Okay, so by far, most folks have them in spreadsheets offline. That's very typical. So your data is probably in Excel. Some folks have started to store their data online in fewer numbers, all the way in a relational database. Some folks, it's still on paper. And then we see some others have started to contribute their data into other locations where data can be stored, sharing it with the DRWI partners or directly to the water quality portal, which is common in New Jersey, as that's been a practice of theirs for a number of years. All right, great. So your data will need to be organized in a standardized format, and Data Studio can kind of handle data in 2 common formats that are out there, but you'll be able to do slightly different things with that data. So again, the format's really important. Let's take a look at what those formats are. This first one on the left, comes by a couple of names. You can call it matrix data, flat data, or tidy data. If you submit data to the DWR partners at ANS, your data is going to be submitted to them in this format. And it basically has 3 rules, and that's that every observation is on a separate row, every parameter gets its own column, and there's only 1 value in each cell. And so if you just follow those basic rules, your data should be able to read in to Data Studio, and you'll be able to make comparisons between stations and parameters and things like that. The other common format that we see a lot in water quality data is stacked data. This is different. You'll see that we have multiple events occupying multiple rows. All of the parameters are stacked into 1 column, and all the values are stacked into 1 column. This is a data format that allows you to store metadata, more information about how that sample was collected. So it's very important for high quality data storage and for sharing data with others and in data portals. It's a little more limited in some of the analyses you can do without rearranging it back to that flat version. The data set we're going to look at today came from the water quality portal in that stacked format, and then I rearranged it to the tidy format for us to do some exploration with. And if you have questions about this and about data management, I've done a training on these types of formats and how to get your data there. And so we can share those resources with you if you're interested. So the second step is you're going to be building a report, and you want to give some thought as to what kind of report that you want to build. What is the story that you're trying to tell of your monitoring program? And that's going to probably inform how you get started, but also might inform what your data set looks like going into this. So you might want to build a data discovery app and show just what data is available in your watershed from a variety of partners. If you happen to have data like the water quality portal that we'll see has received data from multiple providers. You may want to tell the story of a single pollutant. So build a dashboard that tells the story of chlorides in your watershed or E. coli, and you can see how that number is changing and then the data that you're getting from a variety of stations on that one parameter, and have a map that may show certain locations of sources of those pollutants. You may want to do a station deep dive, so everything that's happening at that station, and so you're building a report about a station this time, and you may have multiple charts that show multiple parameters that may have some relationships that you can find as you discover the data and you move through it and examine things of changes in time and location. You can also try to build something that's very public facing, a scorecard. So maybe not that raw data, but data that's rolled up and ready for non-science audiences. So giving some thought to how you want to share your data and what kind of report you want to build is going to be helpful before you get started. To build a report, it is pretty straightforward, as we'll hop in here in a little bit, but this is what the interface looks like. Generally, you just have some different objects that you can add to the report. This is a front end editor, so basically what you're editing and building on the report is what the end product looks like. And in the right hand panel, you get some options for configuring the different objects that you're dropping on the report. And then lastly, the step 3 to publish your report, as we'll see, quite easy to either just generate a link that can be viewed by others and shared. You can schedule this to be sent out by email, or you can embed a report, a dashboard directly in a website quite easily. So with that said, I'm glad we got through the slide portions pretty quickly. That's going to leave us more time for following along and demo. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this link. And I'm going to paste this in the chat box. And if everyone clicks that link, that should open up to a Google Sheet, which is a data set that I extracted from the water quality portal just last week. Someone will have to remind me the name of the watershed that I grabbed, because that's even escaped me at this point as we get in there and take a look at this on the map. So, and we're going to try something else today to kind of make sure that I know how everyone's moving along. I'm going to keep an eye on this participants window. And as folks kind of move from one step to the next and everyone's kind of followed along, I want you to go ahead and either hit the yes button and just let me know that you guys have made it this far and that I can move on to the next step. And that way I can make sure kind of everyone's following along with us. This is something new today I'm going to try. But once you do that, and hopefully some folks have already started registering for Google Data Studio, your next step is going to be just search for Data Studio in your browser and go ahead and click on Google Data Studio Overview. And are you guys still seeing my screen here?
Yep.
Okay. And go ahead and click yes if everyone has followed along up to this point and they see this screen in front of them. You can, if you click on participants in the bottom of your Zoom window, then you get some options there. All right, I see Krista has clicked yes. A couple others started to click in there. All right, I'm seeing a few. All right, great. Your step next is up here in the top left-hand window, you see create. And you guys are going to want to go ahead and create a new data source. And you're going to select Google Sheets. If that data set WQP tidy does not immediately show up here in your list as it does for me, you can do one of two things. You can go ahead and save a copy from this data set right up here in File, or on the Data Studio page, you can come down here to URL and paste that URL directly in there to link to that data set. And then once you have the data set identified here, you want to go ahead, click on that sheet. It should automatically detect sheet 1, and up here in the top right, you're going to click connect. So a little blue button up in the top, and I'll pause there again to kind of make sure. I'm going to go ahead and clear everyone's yeses and see if everyone has now joined us here on this screen. This is your data connector where you're basically, it's just reading in the data from the spreadsheet. See 3 yeses, because there is a step that we need to do here. 4. All right, folks are starting to come in, so I'll start talking about the one thing that we have to do. As you take a quick scan here of the data, you're going to see everything has been, for the most part, correctly identified as a number. The one thing that we're going to want to change is lat long. If we're interested in building maps, it typically just sees the lat long coordinates as a text data type. And so we want to change that to geo and then latitude, longitude. And that's going to allow us to make some pretty easy maps of the data. And that should be the only data type that we have to reassign when you get to this page. All right, Kelly, I see a no from you. You can unmute it, or oh, I see a yes now. Okay, so hopefully you've got it there. All right, so we're clicking latitude, longitude, and you would click continue. I'm not going to do this because I already have my data set map, so I'm going to back out, but you guys go ahead and confirm that and connect to that data source. All right, the next thing you're going to be doing, we're going to navigate back to this create button now that we've created a data source. I'll go ahead and clear out everyone's status there, and we're going to build a report.
Adam, there's a question in the chat. Can you show how you change the data field again?
Yeah, let me back up. I'll do that one more time. Yep.
Thanks.
So in creating a data source, Google Sheet, however we navigated to the data set, and then scrolling down to lat long, right there it says text as a drop down. We click that drop down, go to geo, and then select latitude, comma longitude. And from there, you can directly hit create report, and that'll take you right to the same place that we're headed together. Okay, and everyone should eventually land on a screen that looks like this. This is a blank report, and Google Data Studio always decides to go ahead and just drop in a table for you as a starting object. So I think I've got everything cleared out. Let me, if everyone has landed here, that would be just lovely. If I can see some yeses. Great. Okay. So, wasting no time, then let's jump right in and familiarize ourselves with this layout. Basically, up at the top here are going to be where you find the different objects and things that you can add to your report. Most commonly, I'm going to this Insert tab, and I am selecting something here that I want to add. In this case, we're going to go ahead and start with a Google map. So let's select Google Map and drop it onto the report. You can drag it to make it a little bigger. So everybody likes a nice big map interface, and go ahead and just add that there. To familiarize ourselves here a little bit more, as you see here, you click on the background and nothing is highlighted. You have options to edit your overall theme and layout. When you click on an object, your right panel changes, and now you can configure the data elements and the style elements of that particular object. And that's how you can edit the various things that you're putting on your report. Up here, you can toggle between view and edit. So at any point, if you want to see how something is working, click the view button. As you can see, it's pretty much the same as the edit button, only now our options have gone away and we're interacting with the report that we've built. So clicking back to edit, let's see some of the other things that we can do. If we click on our map, let's first look at who's providing the data in this particular watershed around the east side of Philadelphia and New Jersey. So we can go ahead, and it's already figured out that lat long is our geo coordinate, so that's helpful. And let's see, if we scroll all the way down to the very bottom, record count, we can simply drag record count over, and let's drop it onto size. So now we're seeing roughly how many records we have on the map, and which stations have more records are appearing with a larger circle. Perhaps we're also curious to see who's providing these different data sets. So if we scroll up to the top, we've got a couple of categorical variables here. One is called organization formal name. That's what it's called in the water quality portal. And let's drag that over to the color dimension. And so now immediately our map is updated. It's got a little key at the bottom, and it is color coordinating the data that we see out there by the provider. So we can see that the Delaware River Basin Commission is collecting a lot of data along the main stem. Delaware DREC has a lot of monitoring just upstream of Wilmington where the state line is. And then we'll see up here in the watershed that it's the New Jersey DEP's AmeriCorps program, which is providing some of the data that's available up in the top. So just interesting to see who's providing data and where. And right now, this is just showing us the record counts. If we want to see different information that's provided here, perhaps any one of these water quality parameters, all we need to do is drag it over to replace that metric. So instead of record count, now we can say dissolved oxygen. Now, automatically, you have to be careful here. Whenever you add a number to this, it typically defaults to the sum. And so we might be interested actually more in the average. And so we would click that sum button and choose average instead, because we're not interested in summing dissolved oxygen values. The average would be more useful to us. And so now we can see what average dissolved oxygen looks like. So let's go ahead and see that the next thing we might want to do to a report like this, or add some filters. If we go up to insert, filters are down here towards the bottom. We could add a date range control, so we can just drop that onto the report, and that's going to allow us to select the dates that are available. I'm going to add another one. I'm going to select drop down list from insert. That's another filter. And this time it's selected the organization formal name. So let's see how that works. I'm going to go ahead and put, instead of dissolved oxygen, I'm going to go back to record count, because that seemed to be working a little better. And if we click on view, the organization formal name, so now we can filter the report by the data availability. So if we only want to see what is coming in from the Delaware River Basin Commission, we can click only on the DRBC, and now we're just seeing the data that's available from them. So you can see how pretty quickly you're building a dashboard that's allowing you to look at your data in a live manner. And you could take this directly as it sits and now embed this on a website, or just simply share this link with your constituents, or you may want to build separate reports for board or for funders. I've actually even built reports inside our organization just to help us look at our own evaluation data and who's showing up to our webinars and things like that, and where we're supporting organizations through our work. So these dashboards, again, they're not restricted just to science uses, but these are the ways that we would use them for examining water quality data. Let's click back to edit, and let's add a page. So let's start over a little clean and look at some other things we can do. So we'll leave that one where it is, and let's do a dashboard for a specific water quality parameter, and see how some of the things we can do there. So we can go ahead and insert this time. Let's do a time series plot. Very common in our lines of work to see how things are potentially changing over time. And let's select as a value, right now it's defaulting to record count, but let's look at chlorides instead. I'm going to delete the record count out of there. And again, it defaults to sum, which isn't very useful for what we're trying to examine in our line of work, and an average would be more useful. We'll show ways that we can eventually drill down to individual observations, but you always have to be cognizant of the data that you're putting into these. So at this point, we are dumping in data from a number of events over years, data from a number of stations, and data from a number of sources. So that is all being shown here together. We can use filters, which we'll get to hopefully here in a minute, to eventually drill down to say if you want to look at specific information at a specific site from a specific provider, you can build a report that is only looking at that information. But just wanted to point out that it's always very useful to remember what data is feeding in, especially if you're grabbing a data set like I did from the water quality portal, which has a number of data sets in there. So we've got a chart here, and we're looking at average chloride values over time. So I like to, go ahead and add a couple filters right off the bat. I'm going to add a date range control. I'm going to add another drop-down list for the organization. So it shows activity start date, and I'm going to go ahead and change that and drop organization name onto activity start date. So now we have another filter there that we can control the data with. I'm also going to, let's see, add some kind of report card style little tickers, which I like. Sometimes they're useful on a dashboard like this. It's called scorecard. And I'll go ahead and drop it on the dashboard. And I like to often show a max, min, and average of the data if we're doing a parameter-based report. So for this one, it's selected chloride and it's selected the sum, and I'm going to change this one to the max value. And then also in the edit button, I'm going to change the name to maximum chloride. Now I can copy this quite simply. Say I have my formatting the way I want it and I don't want to start from scratch, and I can paste a couple of more of these, drag them down. And this one I'm going to make the average, and this one I'll make the min. Instead of maximum, now this one's the average, and now this one is going to be the minimum observed. So we're seeing quite a range here in our chlorides from minimum to maximum. What else might we want to drop on here? We could Well, let's see how this works for now. So we go ahead and click view. Very simple looking dashboard at this point. But if we want to say change the information that we're seeing, we could only do DRBC data and see what that data looks like. We could add back in New Jersey. We might be interested only in the last year, so we're going to select a start date of 20. Now let's do 2 years so we don't lose too much data. Go ahead and select January 1st, and then today, December 8th. Oh, somehow went to the future. That's not good. Oh, I keep doing that. Okay, hit apply, and now we'll see that the date range is changing, and we're only looking at the chloride values that have been shared to the water quality portal in the last 2 years by these 2 organizations, and we see that the max and the average and the min have changed respectively. We also see I have forgotten to edit the labels there for, they all call the maximum at the moment. So I'll stop right there and see if we have any questions at this point. And feel free, if you have a question, you can type that in the chat box and we can unmute, or we can go ahead and show some other things that we can do as well.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So when it comes to filters, well, backing up, I guess I haven't necessarily been following along myself. I've been listening to what you've been saying. And so I'm not sure if this would work, but could you have like a map and a chart on the same sheet? And if so, then can you have separate filters? So if you want to just narrow things down on the map, you can look at per site. But if you don't want, let's say, sites on, you know what I mean? Like, how does the filter know which visual it's connected to?
Okay, that's an excellent question. So when we click on these, we see that it is connected to the chloride metric, and it's usually going to pick that up from whatever kind of your feature is that you're already working with on the table there. It will stop you if you try to put too many things on one dashboard, because everything that's on the dashboard is trying to necessarily work together. That being said, you can manipulate it so that certain things would only, like the map would only be controlled by the filters, and I think everything has to be filtered together, though. I don't think, yeah, and I think that's probably a good thing necessarily, that if you do control one filter element, everything should change. It should. Well, I say that, but I think I've actually set it up so that it didn't work that way as well. So it may be possible, but it's something you definitely want to keep an eye on, especially if you try to add too many elements to one report. But in that question, let's show you what that would look like if, say, you had a chart and a map on there at the same time, which is definitely doable. So we'll go ahead and put a chart on there as well. So we'll see how this works. And let me go ahead and add some things there. We'll do the record count to the size again, and the organization to the color dimension. Okay. Now let's see, everything should change basically about this, except, well, I don't know, we're showing record counts down here and we're showing chlorides up here. So I guess, yeah, this turned into a better question than I think I realized. We'll see what happens. As this one is connected to chloride, you see, so I don't think it should change the map. If we only click only here, oh, sure enough, it changed the map. Okay, they are connected. Interesting, yeah. Yeah, the filters definitely control all the data that's happening on the dashboard, but you do have to be careful about which data pieces each thing is showing. I don't think I've made this very clear at all. Thank you very much.
No, I think you've gotten to the heart of the question, being the filters control all the data visuals on a single dashboard. So it doesn't seem like you can assign a filter to a map and assign a filter to, you know, some kind of graph. The filter controls all. So yeah, I'll keep that in mind when building dashboards to keep it kind of succinct in terms of what I'm trying to say.
Okay. And it can get confusing once you start putting a lot of things on these things. And I have screwed them up before, and I've kind of had to start over because things just started getting a little too complex. But in this case, it seems, yeah, the filter is operating, is filtering what data is appearing in both of these, even though the graph is showing chlorides here and the map is showing record counts. Let's go ahead and look at what it looks like to go ahead and put a filter directly on the data itself. So say here in on the chloride graph, you can come down here, we'll add a filter that we only want data from a certain organization to come in here. So let me show that again. I've highlighted an object, and then down here I'm adding a filter. And you can select a field from what's available. We'll go ahead and select organization name, and then you can select a condition. And then you'll go ahead and have to type in one of those values. So I believe one is Delaware River Basin Commission. Exactly typed that way. So now the data that's appearing in that map is only from the DRBC. And you could do that the same way if you wanted to build a dashboard only for a particular monitoring location. So that covers filters, or at least getting into it. They can get infinitely more complicated. See what else we might want to do. Let's go ahead and do another page and show how we can start combining multiple parameters onto one plot and start to edit some of the attributes of a plot to make it look the way you want. So let's go ahead and do a scatter chart. And here's where we have now a scatter chart instead of time series, where time would be our X variable. Here we can select an X and a Y variable, and we can look for a relationship in our data, such as temperature and dissolved oxygen, or hardness and chlorides, chlorides and overall specific conductivity, which I assume we'll find a tight relationship there. So let's do that one. Let's do specific inductance on the X-axis. I'm going to drag that over to X, and I will drop chlorides onto the Y. Now this will probably limit the data to places yet where we only have both observed at exactly the same time, and that's turned out to be very few records indeed. So let's try something else. We will do temperature and dissolved oxygen. We will probably get some more data that way. So we will do temperature on the X and dissolved oxygen on the Y. And instead of sum, we'll do average. That's still not a lot of data there. I would have thought those would have been two parameters that had a lot more going on. Let's go ahead and just delete that chart. We'll try something else here. Or as you all are playing, go ahead and select some different parameters. If you find one that looks like a good chart, I would like to hear about it. Sorry, I tested a few of these this morning and everything was working that I tested, so of course they're not working for me now. Well, the time series plots are working, so let's go ahead and do another time series plot, just because I don't want to waste folks' time with me trying to find two parameters that were both collected on at the same events, because that's the constraint that we're putting on the data there. Okay, so instead of record count, let's look at chlorides again, because we know that there seem to be plenty of data there. And let's just show you guys how you start to edit certain aspects of the data elements. So once you have a chart and you've got the pieces in there that you'd like to show, we can do a couple of different things. We can add a breakdown dimension. So maybe we want to see chlorides plotted across station or across a different provider. I will drag the organization name over to the breakdown dimension. And what that's going to do is basically separate all of our data now so that it's being plotted by who collected it. So you can imagine if you've got 10 stations, I wouldn't want to put usually more than 10 records like this onto any one plot. But if you have 10 stations and you'd like to make a comparative plot across those stations to see how visually things are different, this is a good option. Now let's click on Style. Let's go ahead and we've got some really high values up here that are kind of collapsing most of the data at the bottom of the graph. So this graph might be a good option for displaying the data on a log scale. The way you would do that is if in the style options on the right, scroll all the way down, just about all the way down, and you'll have some options here on the axes. And you can say that I would like my left y-axis to be log scale. So when I click that, now we see that if you're familiar with a log scale, logarithmic, you're going to see a lot more of the data at the low end of the values. The higher end values are going to be collapsed as the scale changes greatly, spread out from 0 to 100, and then a smaller gap from 100 to 200, and so on and so forth. But we can see now some of the comparisons between sites, between data providers at these low ends. I didn't drop station into this because I thought there may be too many stations with this data to make much sense of it, but we can do that as well. You can drop, instead of organization, do the monitoring location, and now we will look at chlorides across 10 or 12 different stations. On the style option, you can also select the maximum number of series that it is showing. So right now it's only showing a total of 10. You can increase that. So we could go all the way up to a max of 20. So that's your maximum number of stations that you can show at any one time on a plot. I think that's still a little too many, as you can see here, and then you can click between them to get an idea of which is which. So we can pretty quickly see which stations have these very high values and which stations are in the lower range. Any questions about setting some of the chart options? Is anyone trying to do something on their own that they're having a little trouble with, or they might want some assistance?
We do have some questions in the chat too, if you want to get to them right now or wait until the end.
Okay, I see that. Yeah, I checked to see if I saw it. The filter should be specific to each page, as far as I know. So
there's a question about headers. Do the fields need to be exactly what are shown here in the Google Sheets document, or is there some flexibility in naming the fields?
Oh yeah, you can name them whatever you want. These headers came in exactly from the way the water quality portal stores their data, but you can of course name it whatever you'd like. And yeah, the headers are in the first row, need to be organized that way. All right, so I have a question from Stephen on cleaning up the data from an existing spreadsheet to make it compliant. Are multiple data locations for a single date not acceptable? No, that's fine, because an observation is basically an event and a time and a person. So you can definitely have multiple events at different locations on the same day, and that's going to be perfectly fine. Let's see, question. How did you get the map to appear? Bethany, you had a question about getting the map to appear. Did you have any other trouble there getting the map to show up? Okay. All right. Krista, can you think of anything else that we might want to share how to do? Krista's from the Musconetcong Watershed Association, and she's been using this tool to show dashboards for their data. Are you online with us, Krista?
Yep, I'm right here. One thing I really like is to embed links, clickable links. You're on one of my pages right now, so all of those little icons at the bottom are clickable links that will take you straight to that data. So what I chose to do was to make like a landing page, and then each one of those pages can then direct you to each data, you know, whatever type of data you want to look at. And I use each page to kind of not just show a graph, but give a little bit of an education. So I'll have, you know, the sources, sinks, what can we do? And then if we want to look at the Hughesville site, if you could pull that one up, or I'll share my screen either way.
Yeah, I don't think I have the link handy.
Okay, sure.
You could paste it in the chat box.
Okay.
We have a question from Kristen. Does Google Data Studio differ much from Power BI? Power BI would be a much more advanced tool than Google Studio, capable of doing some much more complicated and more nuanced data visualizations and data analyses. I haven't played much with Power BI. But from what I've seen of some of the final products, it appears similar that you can build these dashboards. I find Data Studio to be a much more approachable technology for folks, and it's constantly evolving. It couldn't do maps a year ago, so we'll see, what it's capable of in the future. But I would say Power BI definitely has some capabilities that you could run into limits on Google Data Studio, particularly with some of the time series data that we get generated in the Delaware watershed from How's My Waterway. I'm sorry, from the Enviro DIY network. Some of that sensor data pretty quickly just becomes, it's too much data for Google Data Sheets to handle. So if you want to, if you're trying to build one of these directly from Google Data Sheets, I have at times with groups before taking that data, instead calculated daily statistics, a daily high average, and then it's a lot less data to show. So you can do it that way. Or if that data is stored in like a SQL server, you could possibly show the raw data that way. But there is maxes that you can hit that I have hit with a few groups that tried to sense.
Yeah, Adam, so that was actually one of my points is, so if we look at my Hughesville site, if for anybody that has like live continuous data, especially Enviro DIY, you can link that in. So if you scroll down to the bottom and you see that Enviro DIY link right there, it's going to take you to the page where it's going to describe my sensor data, what the sensors do, what they look like, what they're measuring, and then it's going to give you that link so that you don't actually have to host the data right here because it is too much, but it's going to take you to that site. So all these clickable links, the dashboard can house it there, and then it can be external, but it's all housed in one spot. And I find that to be really easy for people that don't know where everything is, but they can come right to Data Studio and have it all be in one spot and have all the links present just inside a Data Studio.
And another thing that I've seen people leverage this way, particularly if you like this idea of building a dashboard for each of your stations and telling the story of that station, is that you can then link to these dashboards from a map. So say if each one of these it could just be a URL that you can attach, and if you had an ARC Online, a story map, or even just a simple Google map, can be the main interface, and then at each point leads you to these. Colleen has a question about the lat longs. For Google Data Studio, there are a couple of ways to make map data show up. They have two options. There's a Geo Maps and then there's Google Maps, and they both want your geo data a little differently. You can, if you go into the help forums on Google Data Studio, you'll find pages that basically say what the data needs to look like for each parameter, and the geo ones are probably the most specific. To show up as a point, they definitely want that latitude, longitude all in one field. So that is one thing I had to do to the data that came out of the water quality portal, because it comes out in separate latitude and longitude fields. So I created a third field that just concatenated those two variables and put a comma in the middle. And then that was the format that Google Data Studio needed that in. So you do have to be specific, at least with that one, if you're interested in building these maps, what that data looks like. Any other questions, or want anything else potentially demonstrated that hopefully I can do on the fly?
I might have another one. For maps, are there any filters for like almost like GIS style, like county boundaries, or other kind of, I guess what I consider shape files or base maps to visually divide that up? Or is that, am I talking more now going into like an online ArcGIS type of program?
You know, I do find ARC Online to be an easier place to start bringing in those different boundaries. So yeah. At this point, they're not accepting additional geo files to leverage in these maps, but the other option, instead of the Google Maps, the geo chart that you drop in there, it requires different configuration. So instead of lat long, it actually wants like it wants USA, Maryland, county, city, state in separate fields, and then it will show you basically county by county, or those more graphic boundaries, and show where data shows up there. I find it a little more limiting because the state is the lowest resolution. So unless your watershed stretches across the entirety of your state, that map is usually a little too zoomed out for sure.
Thank you.
Yep. That being said, the same data that once it's up here on Google Sheets, your ARC Online projects, if you like building those, can read that data in directly from that Google Sheet as well, to show points and build maps. So you can make it so that you only have one data set that is feeding products you might build in either ARC Online or Google Data Studio, or a product that's using both of them to deliver this information. It can all come from a Google Sheet, so that there is integration there. Any other questions about getting the data ready, or if you can think of some way that you might want to show data that we didn't cover? I will say there's also some built-in themes here that you can click on. It will go ahead and change the overall theme of your whole report. These are all built in, or you can edit basically every aspect of these. You can drop your logo right in here, as we saw Krista's done. So yeah, all the customization is pretty easy. The hardest part is obviously if you want to do any filtering, or if you want to leverage multiple variables on the same product.
Lisa, did you have a question?
I did. I wanted to go back to that last question again, with the maps, the mapping. So if you have something like AutoCAD where we're looking at a property boundary, or some specific boundary, or is that able to get placed in this particular program? I guess we were talking about ArcView and all that, but the same thing. If we're trying to, if we put in a lat and a longe and we show a mapped area, but now we want to show a specific site boundary on that location to show, this is the area of concern. Is that able to be done?
Yeah. So as far as Google Data Studio knows, it doesn't know if these points are monitoring locations or shopping malls or what. So you can do that. You can submit information, different lat longs that are other things that you want to show. It does get really tricky if you try to upload more than one data set. So usually that all has to be in one data set. And so in that case, you might have to fudge something. If you wanted some additional points to show up, not necessarily as a monitoring station, but something else, you could put those points into your data set and then assign them a new categories. And so instead of a monitoring, you maybe say point type. And most of your monitoring data might be, say, it's a monitoring station, but this one is a restoration site. And then you could have the map show them up with 2 different colors. Does that help? All right, we are just about out of time, it looks like. And Colleen has pasted a link there in the chat box to our training evaluation. So hopefully this kind of got all your guys' interest peaked, and you can see relatively how easy it is to kind of get started and start to figure things out and build reports that you might want to share to look at your data. I'm of course always available to help answer questions. If you get started in this, you're running into some problems, I'm happy to try to answer a question. I'm available. And I always like seeing what people come up with, because I think the strongest examples here are case studies for when we do these trainings. We like to show that folks are adopting these tools and finding them to be useful. So please do share any examples that you built with me, and I'd be happy to see them.
Yeah, and thanks everyone. I will be sending around the recording and the links to the other webinars shortly. So look out for that. And thank you all very much. I appreciate your time, and have a great rest of your day.